About 20 years ago, I was running a game of Dungeons & Dragons for a group of friends. I was still pretty new to running games and at the time didn't trust myself to create my own adventures, so I pulled something random off of Reddit. It was your bog-standard mini-adventure. Party discovers local goblins, tracks them back to their lair, fights the local goblin horde and goblin wizard boss, saves the local villages from goblin raids. Pretty basic stuff. The party had seen two groups of scouts and scoped the main entrance to the lair, then decided to go in search of a less conspicuous way to enter. They find a hidden way into the lair with only a single goblin guarding it, and it was at this point that the druid said to the rest of the table, "Have you guys noticed that none of the goblins we've encountered are male?" This was not a deliberate design choice of the adventure, nor, if I'm being honest, was it deliberate on my part. This observation had no relevance to anything that was going on. But suddenly I had a hunch, and that hunch said, well, this matters to the players. Let's make it matter to the narrative. All of a sudden, this wasn't about fighting the goblins. The guard at the bottom of the secret entrance was happy to let them in, and filled them in on the details, how a spell-casting goblin had come into their midst with promises of riches, how he had systematically dismantled their existing social structures, placing himself in charge and sending all the male goblins to work in the local mines and raid humanoid villages. The remaining goblins were planning a revolution. All they needed was a spark to light the fire, and the party was that spark. Rather than fighting through the goblin horde was on their side. I buffed the spellcaster and gave him some hellhounds to make the fight more even, and, working together, the party and goblins defeated the evil wizard and restored order to the goblin community. Fast forward several levels, and the party needs to cut back through that area to chase a big bad. They're on a time crunch, but had no means of traveling quickly, until they encountered the goblins they had saved all those levels before. See, once the wizard was gone, these goblins had no interest in raiding local villages anymore. Instead, they established peace treaties and a robust trading network that had lifted all of the local villages to new heights. To transport goods quickly, they established a network of baskets and ropes that let them move through the forest canopy at great speed. And the goblins, still grateful to these heroes for what they had done, transported the party through the forest, saving them vital time and allowing them to finally catch up with the villain of the moment. Hi, I'm Astral Marmot, and today we're going to talk about letting go, what it means, why it's important, and why it's so darn hard for the neurodivergent mind to do. I told that story because it's the moment that I learned in order to pivot in the direction of the game being played, I had to let go of the story as written. It was completely within my power to ignore the druid's observation and continue with the standard narrative, and none of the players would have been the wiser, and it would have been an okay adventure. Instead, it was a great adventure, and that's because I did three things. Let go of my expectations of what should happen, follow the players down the path they thought was interesting, make their choices impact the world going forward. I could make a video about each of these, maybe tell me in the comments if that's something you'd like, but today I'm going to focus on the first part, how to let go of your expectations and follow the flow of the moment. So why is this so hard? Well, entire philosophies have been built around the idea of finding and being in the flow, like if it was easy, the Tao Te Ching would be a pamphlet. But when we narrow the scope from being in the flow of life to being in the flow of the game, we encounter several things working against us. First, the prevalence of game systems like D&D and Pathfinder has seeded our collective consciousness with the notion that the game master is in near total control of everything that happens. We control the environment, the monsters, the good guys, the bad guys, and on top of that we're responsible for judging the success or failure of the player's choices. The game master is God is a phrase you'll hear tossed around a lot, and a lot of GMs believe it. Frankly, I find this mindset to be obstructive to good gameplay. The GM doesn't control the environment, the GM is playing as the environment, and the monsters and good guys and bad guys, and yes, sometimes we get to play as gods. Think of the world not as a thing you control, but as a character you play, full of contradictions, intrigues, and mysteries that the party will discover as they get to know who your character is. Just as the players don't always control what happens to their PCs, we also cannot always control what happens to our world, no matter how vast it is. I talked about the fear of releasing control in my video on contingency traps, but let me assure you again that you don't need to fear losing control. You never had it to begin with, and you can't be afraid of losing something you don't have. Now, the GM absolutely has responsibilities at the table that other players do not, including exercising your power to adjudicate actions or ensuring that players aren't violating the table boundaries that you definitely talked about in Session 0. But there's a difference between power and control. You may have the power to say whether a roll succeeds or fails, but you don't control what number shows up on the face of that die. You're also constrained in your judgment by the rules of the game. In D&D, for example, you can't up and decide a natural 20 doesn't hit in combat just because you don't want it to. Ultimately, the player's power over the narrative, while different, is just as great as yours. You have to embrace the lack of control, which is to say, you have to let go. An experienced game master knows that the most magical moments at the table happen when you yourself don't know what will happen next. That lack of surety isn't to be feared. It's one of the greatest joys of playing tabletop games. Fear is also at the root of the next obstacle, trust, or lack thereof. And I don't mean not trusting your players, I mean not trusting yourself. It is impossible for me to speak for all neurodivergent peoples or people with ADHD. I can only speak from my own experience and knowledge. And what I do know is that extreme anxiety and self-doubt are common symptoms on the spectrum of electric skull soup problems, including ADHD. These are absolutely universal human emotions, but in neurotypical people, they're not necessarily debilitating. For me, it can be. Both anxiety and self-doubt can cause us to freeze up, or overreact with too heavy of a hand. As far as freezing up goes, for me at least, it happens far less often than I feared when I began GMing. This goes back to self-trust. I found that rather than not having any ideas, I can lean on the part of my brain that sees connections between anything. We do this well in general, but we do it especially well under the right amount of pressure, and for me, being a game master is just the right amount of pressure to perform. If you do freeze up, first, don't panic. It can happen to any GM at any level of experience. The likelihood is that your brain is full of ideas, maybe too many ideas, and you just have to pick one. Remember, if you're truly stuck, it's okay to ask the table to take a break so you can think about it. It won't hurt the game to take 5, and you probably forgot you need to use the bathroom anyway. But obviously you don't want to stop the game every time something unexpected happens. It's a tactic at your disposal, but one to use sparingly and for important decisions that have some weight to them. Ultimately, being a game master means knowing how to improvise. You have to be able to come up with something in the moment, or take a thread that's been handed to you and run with it, and you need to do it with confidence. This goes back to the goblins in their hideout. A player handed me a thread I didn't expect, and rather than dropping it, I picked it up, wove it into the larger narrative, and then extended that thread over time so that when the players came back, the world had changed for the better because of their actions. This is the secret at the heart of game mastering. Whatever problem your players have handed you is also the solution. The moment you stop thinking of it as a problem and recognize that they've just told you what direction they want the story to go, all you have to do is improvise along the line they've given you to follow. But in order to successfully improvise new circumstances, you have to let go of your expectations about the original circumstances, and that can be hard to do. A common symptom of ADHD and many adjacent illnesses is RSD, or rejection-sensitive dysphoria, in which we are extremely sensitive to criticism or rejection, both actual and perceived. This manifests as intense emotional reactions, a constant preoccupation with criticism, a negative self-image reinforced by negative self-talk, and difficulty accepting even constructive criticism. I suspect this is at the root of why letting go of our vision is so hard. It feels like we're being rejected, even though, objectively, the players have no idea what's in your head and their choice to do something else has nothing to do with you or the quality of your game mastering. It's just how players do. But it's still discouraging when things don't work out the way you hoped they would, and because we feel that disappointment so keenly, it makes it even harder for us to pivot on a dime. Here, instead of freezing up, we can overreach and try to railroad the players back onto the path we were expecting. This is a trap. You will never get back on track by going off-roading. Thing is, you're not actually off track. You're on a different track, one chosen by your table, and the only way to find out where it leads is, you guessed it, by letting go of your expectations and running with the moment. It's natural to feel disappointed that the cool thing in your head didn't happen, but it didn't, and the faster you can accept that and move forward, the faster you'll realize that whatever crazy track your table built collaboratively is even cooler than the thing you came up with on your own. The more you do it, the easier it becomes to just let it go. It's like a wave coming at you in the ocean. You could stand there and let the wave knock you down, or you can dive into it and move through it. And more often than you'd expect, you'll find that you've caught the wave and can ride it. To bring it all home, the GM isn't God. The world is our character, different from the player characters, but fundamentally an entity over which we only have so much control. Don't cling to control. You really don't have it or need it, and clinging to it will only inhibit you in your game. Trust yourself to improvise in the face of the unexpected. You're probably better at it than you realize. Freezing up happens, but less than you'd think. Give yourself grace to deal with it. Railroading is not the answer. Instead of lamenting that your campaign is off the rails, build new tracks along the unexpected path as you go. Don't let your inner critic win. That voice is lying to you. You're actually better at this than you think. And finally, stay in the moment. Release your expectations of what should happen and focus on what is happening. When you find yourself longing for what might have been, don't cling to it. Just let it go, and watch your game take off beyond your wildest expectations. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found yourself in a more zen state of mind about your game. Leave me a comment about a time you let go, or a time you didn't and should have, because I love reading your campaign stories, both the good and the bad. If you want to support the channel or show your appreciation for the fact that I didn't use a single image from Frozen, you can join the awesome people on screen now and buy me a cup of tea at ko-fi.com/Astral Marmot. For now, thanks again for watching, go get a glass of water, and may you let go of everything that holds you back. And unclench your jaw.